They have reached out to me.
When I go in and
Have a chat after this.
I have an ode China.
This week it's just.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Statutory Planning Committee meeting of the 8th of October 2025. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing via the Commission's website and YouTube. Committee members may refer to technical devices for the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past and present. Apologies and leave of absence today. We have all members in attendance and Commissioner Adair, we welcome you online today. Members, are there any requests for leave of absence? Thank you very much. And disclosures of interest, I've received one today in relation to item 3.2, the standard structure plan for Point Grey, in application to extend the approval time from Member Knight, an actual impartiality interest, with the reason being that Member Knight advised that her previous role as the chair of the Peel Harvey Catchment Council could reasonably be perceived to adversely affect her impartiality on matters relating to Point Grey. Member Knight, I understand that you'll be stepping out on this item. Thank you very much. And members, just to confirm, there are no other conflicts of interest to declare. Thank you very much. Disclosures of representation on the items, I've received none. Are there any to declare? Thank you all. And declaration of due consideration, can all members please indicate they've received and considered the agenda ahead of the meeting? Thank you. And just to note that additional information has been provided to members at item 1.4. Deputations and presentations, we do have a few of those today, so I'll now hand over to Sam. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to everyone that's present in the room in order to make a deputation to the committee this morning. You will be invited to join the table to deliver your deputation this morning. You have been advised of the allocated time, which will be managed by a timer which will appear on the screen and count down that allocated time. If you do have a PowerPoint presentation this morning, we will display this on the screen for you. You're requested to advise as you wish to advance the slides. So moving to the first deputation on the agenda this morning, which is on item 3.1 on the agenda, which is the Part 11B development application for the proposed demolition of the existing development and construction of a 14-storey mixed-use development at 27 to 35 Outram Street and 46 Ward Street, West Perth, or welcoming Dan Lees, George Ashton, John Mayle, Ruben Cooperman, Grant Brookford and Christian Donaldson. If you'd like to join us at the table, please.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair and committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak briefly and respectfully request your approval of what will be a unique and distinctive addition to the West Perth locality. You have before you a positive officer report recommending approval subject to standard conditions that we endorse. This proposal represents an exciting opportunity to deliver an iconic redevelopment of a full street block in West Perth. The development is the culmination of an ambitious vision to create a highly sustainable workplace environment to serve as a new benchmark for the office precinct, as well as the on-site offerings in terms of staff wellbeing. This project has been designed having regard for the existing and the continued character of West Perth, which the City of Perth's current planning framework characterises as a suburb of buildings placed within a landscape setting. However, it also looks to the future with regard to the scale of development that is anticipated by the city's future local planning scheme number 3 in terms of plot ratio and building heights, with these factors being earmarked for increases by the city's local planning strategy that received endorsement by the WA Planning Commission in 2023. Importantly, this proposal is aligned with the proposed maximum plot ratio of the future planning scheme. As a project team, we intentionally met early and over a number of sessions with the City of Perth's planning and design teams to talk through the approach and the rationale as to why we were considering the Part A and B pathway. I think it is fair to say that the City has been broadly supportive of this project throughout the process and fully appreciating why we were taking this project down this pathway. And we look forward to delivering on the verge improvements, which will seamlessly tie in the ground plane with the surrounding local streets. The response to the identified character of West Perth will be particularly evident with the extensive landscape setback areas that seek to seamlessly extend the garden setting of West Perth into the ground plane pedestrian experience. Almost 60% of the subject site is given over to landscaping and open space at the ground level, introducing new tree planting and deep soil areas that are provided along the street boundaries where they're of most value, so as to create a shaded streetscape environment and contribute to the city's tree canopy coverage initiatives. Focus on landscaping is also extended up through the building with landscape terraces that provide a connection to nature for future building occupants, which is essentially a vertical green shroud for the building that reflects that landscape setting of West Perth. In summary and in closing, your approval today is respectfully requested as per the officer recommendation. Your approval will support a high quality landmark built form that will make a significant positive contribution to the streetscape and the amenity of West Perth. As set out in the officer report before you, this proposal is consistent with the aims and objectives of the City of Perth's new local planning strategy and embodies the city's desire to attract and retain major businesses and promote the continued growth of West Perth as a mixed-use precinct. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Dan and all, for being here today. Appreciate your deputation. Now open for questions from members. Go ahead, Commissioner Heron.
Thank you. The ground plane landscaping is well understood. I did want to understand though with the vertical landscaping, and we appreciated the challenges in a Perth context with vertical landscaping, and if there could be some explanation as to the species selection or how it's intended to keep green bits green.
I might start with that, and perhaps if I can hand over to Grant or Christian from the design team to speak a bit further. But it's a trellis system, and there's been extensive investigation of that, not only by the landscape architect, but also gone out to an actual contractor who will do the installation, make the species selection, which is informed the size, depth and dimension of those planting beds, and the density of the trellis system to ensure that we can actually achieve the outcome that we're looking for, appreciating that this is a Western Australian climate. If Grant had anything further to add to that?
Yeah, we've taken a pretty deep dive already, as Dan's indicated, both in terms of management, future management and installation, but also working with Aspect. We've done a pretty detailed solar incidence analysis of the building profile to determine what's getting sun at what time of year. That is directly informing the species selection, so that the right species are placed in the right orientation, optimal to their preferences. So I guess from to the DA level, that's already quite a bit, and we continue. It's a very important piece for the client, and there's a commitment there to do it right and look after it.
I think one of the other things to add is one of the big components of making it work is being able to access it easily. That's part of the design, that there's an accessible walkway on every level, which makes it very easy to maintain, which is one of the other key design aspects.
Thank you. Through the chair, you tick the boxes from my perspective. The other one is if you could talk to the service department components, which it is assumed is going to be used as part of the overall operation of the building. Are you able to sort of speak to the intended operation of it? I'm assuming it is listed as short-term accommodation. Can that be confirmed?
Well, they're intended as executive suites for this particular tenant, which is part of the Hancock group of businesses. So it would provide for visiting executives or guests of the business who are in Perth, either for a short or an extended period of time. It's really to ensure that they've got somewhere to stay. I mean, I think the availability of accommodation for residential or short-term or hotel. Shortage of that is pretty well publicised in Perth at certain times of the year. The hotel room, as we can all read in the media. So to ensure that these are available for guests, executives and clients of the business and provided.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lakey.
Thank you very much. Just a quick one. I know that the SDRP is generally complimentary. Back in July, they did have a few bullet points of recommendations, and obviously, I think plans will evolve from them. Are you confident that the comments on the things highlighted by the SDRP covered in this latest plans?
Yes, so we did engage fairly extensively with the state design review panel twice before lodging, and then the final time, as you've mentioned, sought to take on board the feedback where possible, incorporate that and accommodating the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Any further comments? Rather, Commissioner Adair, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Dan, I wanted to dig in a bit deeper on what you were saying about the residential component of this development. The architecture, by the way, I think, is outstanding, but the objective of this area is actually to have mixed use. And whilst you kind of tick the box there, I'd like you to explain a bit more how you feel that you're meeting the objectives for this area, because you're not actually providing any residential at all. And the additional uses of pool and bar, they're private from what I understand. So no public will be able to ever access any of that. Can you provide a bit more detail on how you believe you meet the planning objectives for West Perth?
Sure. I think, West Perth is characterised as a mixed-use area. To my mind, that means that the area as a whole, the precinct as a whole, has a mix of land uses, not necessarily that each individual building or development needs to have a mix of uses within it. There are plenty of examples of entirely residential buildings in West Perth, and in the same way that there are plenty of examples of buildings that are exclusively office or commercial. In that respect, this building does have a mix, albeit it's a reasonably small one in terms of the proportions of office versus executive suites. Looking at the city's planning framework, and in particular the future planning framework, if we look to the draft local planning scheme number 3, what I find interesting there is that office is a permitted land use, multiple dwelling is a discretionary land use. So I think, given that distinction between office being permitted and multiple dwellings, residential being discretionary, I think there's a contemplation from the city that buildings that are entirely office or commercial are permitted, whereas a residential use is discretionary. So that's where we've taken some guidance from the future planning framework, as well as the prevailing character of West Perth, which is a broad mix. Not necessarily a 50-50 split of residential and office within each individual building.
Okay, and just to be clear, the other uses on the site, they are just for that building, aren't they?
The other uses where you refer to the amenity uses, yes, they are for the
Right, yes.
Private
Yeah,
use.
okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Dan. Just also to note, we did receive your contact on the written deputation that raised the issue of the Federation dwelling, and we do note that the picture provided is of a set of, not of the dwelling on the site, but of one that the deputy is referring to in Fremantle. So that's been noted, and that information's been provided. And I don't know if you want to comment on that. I mean, obviously from our perspective, we understand it doesn't have any statutory protection, but for the purpose of the deputy, would you like to make any comment on the retention?
Look, I think the officer's report covers it very clearly. In terms of the early considerations at the early design testing for this scheme and this site. It certainly was looked at, the opportunity to retain it and construct a new building around it. It's fair to say that that really would compromise the deliberate whole site, whole block outcome like we have here. I think it's fair to say this is quite distinctive, dare I say, iconic architecture that would just not be possible. That bungalow will be retained, but it was certainly tested in the design studies by the design.
Members, are there any further questions? Okay, thank you very much for your deputation.
This morning is on item 3.2 on the agenda, structure plan for Point Grey local structure plan, the application to time frame. Welcome, Greg Delahunty.
Actually, okay with that. Slides.
Okay, oh yeah, you happy to, yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to address you today. I'm speaking to strongly oppose the extension of the Point Grey structure plan. The original justification for development of Point Grey was tied to a marina-based settlement. Without that marina, its purpose no longer exists. What we're left with is a large, isolated urban settlement that's completely disconnected, unsafe from a bushfire perspective, environmentally damaging, financially unviable, and inconsistent with the state planning framework. There have been a number of changes to the planning framework, most notably at the amendment to the local planning scheme, which has removed the discretion for marina. That was the very reason for Point Grey's existence. At the state planning level, you've had the sub-regional planning framework and SPP 3.7, which have consequential impacts for planning at Point Grey. The Shires local planning strategy now advocates for returning Point Grey to its original tourism uses. The South Metro planning framework advocates that urban expansion must be well directed towards serviced, accessible, safe land. Point Grey fails on all these points. It is unsafe, environmentally damaging, and an illogical extension of urban form that will lock in car dependency. If the Commission is undertaking a health check of its framework's plan, Point Grey will surely be a case study to investigate whether urban zonings are still appropriate. From a bushfire perspective, it is completely unsafe and bushfire prone, located on the edge of a peninsula and relying on one way in, one way out. Even if every tree in Point Grey is cleared to make it a safe space, these residents will be completely cut off in the event of a bushfire. It completely fails to meet the objectives and requirements of the SPP. We've had independent economic analysis that demonstrates that the benefit cost ratio for Point Grey is significantly negative, meaning it's going to be a long-term financial burden on both the state and the local government. The environmental the classifications have changed since the original approval. The original approval was based to a marina-based proposal, but now there are significant threatened ecological communities that are such as the Bankshire woodlands and the Chure woodlands and salt marsh lakes, which have changed in their classification since the original approval. It is no longer environmentally defensible to clear 40 hectares of local natural area for a proposal like this. I understand that the state's suffering some housing challenges. Point Grey is not the area to solve this issue. The Shire of Murray already is highly fragmented urban form, and it has more than enough land to meet its long-term population projections without compounding the societal issues with more urban sprawl. In summary, Point Grey fails to meet every single one of the criteria listed in the WA Planning Manual for extension of structure plans. No lots have been produced. It cannot deliver on its vision anymore. It is inconsistent with the planning framework, environmentally unsound, financially irresponsible, and I urge the Commission not to extend the structure plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg. We appreciate your deputation today. I'll now see if members have any questions of you. Mr. Herring.
Thank you, Greg. And some of the points that you raise, I note. You would accept, however, that the site is zoned urban, and that has occurred some time ago. And from what I was able to derive, that was achieved with the support of the Shire of Murray. Is that your understanding as well?
Correct. At the time, it was a marina-based proposal, and the original zonings and structure plans were put in place. Since that time, the health of the Peel Piper estuary has come under significant pressures, and there has been, I suppose, the community expectations on the environmental outcomes have risen significantly. And through the amendment to the scheme, that marina proposal is no longer possible. So without the marina, I suppose the reasons for Point Grey existing no longer.
Thank you. If I may, through the chair, then in terms of the situation in relation to urban zoned land, because you made reference to the health check, and as you would appreciate, the there is one, even without the structure plan proceeding, you would accept that there are certain rights around urban zoned land and that would be best supported within a framework of some sort.
Completely accept that. The urban zoning does not necessarily mean residential settlement. It can deliver on tourism uses and other uses as well. And the Shire's local planning strategy actually advocates to returning to the original vision for Point Grey, which was a tourism-based settlement.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. Any further questions? Thank you, Greg. Make your deputation.
The next deputation on the same item, item 3, we will need Tim Trefry. Thanks, Tim.
Morning, Chair, members, staff. Well, thanks for your time. The slides are there. I'll let you know when to progress. Look, I'll best give the summary of orderly and proper planning. The land is zoned urban in the Peel Region scheme. It's urban under the Southwest Peel sub-regional framework and is zoned appropriately under the Shire of Murray's town planning scheme. Environmental approvals are in place from both the federal and state environment review. And the amendment that removed the Marina Amendment 314, which was gazetted in January 2022, was supported by both the WAPC and the Minister for Planning. Interesting enough, a previous request from the Shire of Murray to revoke the structure plan formed part of that, and it was refused by both this committee and also the Minister. So today we're really talking about the amendment of the structure plan, not the validity of the structure plan, because it's in place, as is the zoning. Can I project the slides through a little bit, please? Keep going. Next one. Thanks very much. So what was with the marina going was the foreshore park. This was the ability for the marina or alternative use was foreshadowed in both the structure plan and the Shire's town planning scheme. Shire's previous scheme said in the event the marina is not granted approval, the marina village precinct shall be subject to a redesign to facilitate alternative water-focused development. So that was in the scheme. Also, the structure plan talks about the marina village precinct to provide a mixed activity centre that addresses and interacts with the Harvey estuary. So the current structure plan revisions were actually provided for both in the current structure plan as well as the town planning scheme. Timing you may talk about, that talked about Amendment 314 was gazetted in 2022. We were required to wait 2 years for the Shire's char maps to repeal the coastal processes query, which also arose out of the previous decision of this committee. So really we couldn't really start that active work until 2024. So what are we doing at the moment? We are still moving through the process. The coastal processes char map has been dealt with, primary school site has been identified as requested, and we are dealing with the bushfire matters. A secondary access is currently being investigated and working through it with the adjoining owner, who's also happy to assist in that regard in identifying a public access route on gazetted road reserves in the area. Public process also occurred in terms of two community sessions, both held during on a Thursday and a Saturday, widely advertised. No member of the community attended. Previous opposition was mainly around the marina and the estuary, not the settlement of Point Grey, which is one of the reasons I imagine that no one attended the community sessions, because their matter was appropriately dealt with. Getting back to orderly and proper planning, it needs to be logical and ordered. It needs to move from strategic to statutory, and it needs a public planning process, which has occurred. Really, what we're looking here today is to finalise the requirements out of the previous Planning Commission requirements in terms of the matters that were to be addressed through the structure plan. The recommendation from the officers is supported. My one request is that it be extended to 2 years, not 1. And the main reason for that is we are basically dealing with the Shire's continued efforts to work against this proposal, notwithstanding the previous zoning and decisions of both the Minister for Planning and this committee. We can finish everything in 1 year. Experience has shown us that we've thrown a number of blockages at regular intervals that we have to deal with. It's just taking time. Your time.
Thank you very much, Tim. I'll now go to members for any questions of you. Commissioner Herron.
Thank you. And again, I appreciate that the question here is not around the new structure plan, because that is yet to be presented. But obviously there is clearly an interplay and interface, as was covered off in your deputation. So can I just, in relation to the premise in terms of the marina absence and, if you like, its purpose of the precinct, is there anything that you're able to provide insight on in relation to that?
We go back to the Foreshore Park plan on the presentation, but it doesn't matter if you can't get there. The marina is being replaced by the Foreshore Park, and what it does is it looks at providing a jetty which is non-motorised craft. So it looks at the fishing and the crabbing, and we're looking at the ability for people to interact with the estuary in a way that is more environmentally appropriate than the power boats, etc. I personally think it'll get more use than the potential marina, because the people who buy here are buying for wanting to live in this locality, they're wanting to live near the estuary. One of the great attractions is being able to go out and crab and put in the dinghy and move around and activate with it in a way that is appropriate. So the Foreshore Park does that. It's not just a park, there's also some jetties there, and there's also be some cafes, etc. So it's almost like a park for the residents and visitors to the area that can actually interact with the estuary the way that everybody probably has traditionally done down at there. So not the marina, but I think a use that potentially will get more use and more accessibility by the public.
Thank you. Through the chair, then in relation to the issues around access, you did make mention that there is negotiations underway to provide for forms of like road access to the precinct more than one. Is that, do I understand that correctly?
There's one locked in with the environmental approvals at the moment. We're looking at a secondary one. There's a number of gazetted road reserves unmade that provide partially made gravel constructed, which we're just working through at the moment as a requirement of the bushfire management plan. That's being narrowed down to basically one option at the moment, that it will allow constructed secondary access heading south of the site, which will be documented in the BMP, which is what the Commission requested back.
Thank you. And finally, through the chair, the recommendation before us is in terms of the extension of the existing, which obviously is unable to be, or the marina component being unable to be acted upon. The intention, I would assume, is that this is essentially a holding device until such time as the amended plan is presented. Is there any expectation from your perspective that there would be any subdivisional or other works to occur during that period?
Not that I'm aware of. No, we're getting the structure plan in a position to go back for approval.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Adair.
Thanks, Chair. And Tim, I missed that last comment. Did you say that you're preparing something else as well?
Just preparing the revised and amended structure plan to lodge back in for approval, which is with the Commission at the moment, but there's a number of additional information being requested that we're working through. It's just taking longer than we'd like, but we're moving as quickly as I guess the system will allow us.
So through you, Chair, just to elaborate on that, if this were to be approved, whether it's 1 year, 2 years or 3 years, at the end of that time, you'll again be without a framework. So what is the intention? Is there an intention that, as Commissioner Heron was saying, asking, this is practically a holding pattern for this structure plan to get through this amendment process? Would you be looking at lodging a new structure plan at the end of that period or during that period, or do you think you'd be looking to seek an extension should that amendment be approved? I'm just curious, because at the end of that period, you'll have no structure plan again.
The current structure plan will be lodged, will be the new structure plan to be approved. So it'll form the new framework. Okay,
so you'd be seeking for a longer period of time should that be approved?
We're hoping we can do it all within a 2-year period.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Tim, just to drill down on this issue of the 1 versus the 2 years, why do you believe that you need that additional 12 months?
It's just the additional request we're getting from information from sources outside what was requested by the Commission. They seem to be fairly regular ongoing, including things such as the benefit cost analysis from the Shire, which requires us to respond to, albeit I find it interesting that we're doing cost analysis for urban zone land, which is already zoned, and which all the upfront costs are paid for by the developer. I mean, if you wanted to use a similar example 30 years ago when we did Ellenbrook, it probably wouldn't have stacked up. But 30 years out, it was it's one of the major sources of land and affordable land to the market. So you need to trust in the fact that people that do these developments actually do their best benefit cost analysis themselves in terms of how to do delivery.
I'll go to Paul Lakey now. Commissioner Lakey.
Just on that then too. So assuming you get an extension of 1 year, what happens when you get to 10 months and there's another, you'll be going back to the Commissioner for an extension?
That's right. We'd have to come back and seek another extension. And personally, I think you want to see us again, or just let us get on with it. But if the 1 year is granted and for whatever reason, we have to just come back and seek a small extension.
Okay, any further questions? Thanks for your deputation today.
This morning is on item 3.3 on the agenda, which is the standard structure plan for Hammond Quarter Structure Plan Amendment number 1 for determination. And we're welcoming Steve Carter and Dion White.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Good morning, committee members, and thank you for time this morning. I'm going to start by voicing our strong support for the officer's recommendation to approve the amendment to the structure plan. This will allow Cube to achieve a major milestone and bring about the finish and logical completion to our Hammond West estate. So I may just jump to the second slide. At this point, I'd also like to thank the City and the Department officers for getting the amendment this far, and I'm hoping that the committee will also see fit to agree to the recommendation. That said, there is a very minor point of difference relating to bushfire management, although I'll admit it's nice to be debating such a small position rather than anything fundamental. I also appreciate the advice from DFS and the City has put department officers in an awkward situation, but I think in this circumstance, there are extenuating circumstances that need to be considered. Starting with the agreed facts, it is acknowledged that the Christmas trees of Hammond Park is operating on lot 81, as you can see on the slide before you. This business grows a crop of pine trees, all well spaced apart and fully irrigated, which are cut down annually during the Christmas season. In this state, these trees are classified as managed. None of this is disputed. Our point of difference is with the City and DFS adopting a worst case scenario, asking for the farm to be classified as forest. This is to address the unlikely situation where this business walks away, leaving all the trees in situ, suggesting this could grow into a pine plantation. This causes BAL 29 impost to the first row of future residential lots, which brings considerable cost both in terms of construction insurance to those future homeowners. In our opinion, this takes an unnecessary risk profile for a situation which is unlikely to eventuate. It will take many years for the trees to mature to such an extent that they can be considered a pine plantation. And if the business decides to close, logic dictates that at the very least, the last crop of trees will be harvested and sold rather than simply investing time and money in their growth only to leave this investment in the ground. When asked why the need to assume a worst case scenario, the City's advice was that because the farm was not operating via a development approval, it had no way of requiring a bushfire management plan. So it came as a surprise to us when reading the agenda for today's meeting that the City is now assessing a retrospective planning application for the farm. Surely now the City can require a B&P to minimise bushfire risk, not just to our property, but all neighbouring properties, including to the existing house to the west, which you can see before. If I may just ask for the slide change. To be clear, we do not want to see this business shut down. It's a great local business and it really brings something to the local area, and we hope that the city sees fit to issue planning approval. But a commercial venture should still contain its impact to its property. Surely the city can now require a BMP as part of this retrospective application, and all this needs to establish is essentially an exit strategy, that should the business close, that all trees within proximity be removed in the event of a closing. We are not suggesting for a minute we should be putting future residents in harm's way, but we also feel that decisions need to take a more balanced approach to risk, because the alternative is to impose significant and avoidable costs, especially now that the city has a mechanism before it to require a bushfire management plan. Once again, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Lakey.
Thank you. Just a quick one. How many houses do you think that increased bail will affect?
The 29 will be the first row. We do have a rural interface, so that's an R20. So that is by memory about 15, and then the subsequent behind it, but that drops off.
First row, okay.
Okay, any further questions? Go ahead, Harry.
Thank you. Through the chair, and again, bearing in mind that we have no control over the city or its processes, has the city indicated its intention to impose any controls in that regard?
I'm not sure. Leon has reached out.
We're working with the city at the moment to get a meeting just to talk that through and see if we can impose a managed, I guess, condition over the existing operation and or a setback that get that to 12.5. So that's a live issue. I guess the onus is back on us to work on.
Thank you. And if I may, through the chair, again, you made mention of logic, and as you would probably appreciate, logic doesn't always apply. From a risk perspective, however, has there been any consideration in terms of alternative conditional wording which you would suggest might be able to provide flexibility whilst also providing assurance that we don't approve something which could end up being non-compliant?
I suppose the two comments to that query. First of all, in our opinion, it's unlikely to happen there. And notwithstanding the Christmas tree farm, I suppose in a typical situation, there's nothing stopping people deciding to plant a raft of trees next to a property and then it goes from there. So it's this whole pre-development assessment. Secondly, we would appreciate if the advice or at least a mechanism that allows that retrospective application to be considered, which we would think that bushfire management would be a key part of that, and then that could go through the system at the time of subdivision.
Thank you.
Just on that point, can I just clarify that, are you happy to accept, I think the report talks for Class B woodland. Is that what you're seeking?
Now that came up with an earlier conversation where if we work on the premise that the Christmas tree essentially grow two crops, it takes a while. That was worked on the premise that should they harvest half the trees, the density of the yield of that crop, and woodland would be a more appropriate. That's a bit more palatable to us in the sense that future homeowners, Val 19 is a much more better understand construction standard, and insurance does reflect that to an extent. So from that viewpoint, that was a compromise. I suppose our position is still it's a heightened risk of something that we can't actually see ever eventuating.
So even at the Class B woodland status, you're saying that's risk averse?
It will be, personally, yes, I believe so, but it's much more palatable outcome for the construction standards. Val 19 is much more understood.
Thank you for the clarification. I also just had a question just in terms of the linear POS. I know that that's consistent with the rest of the structure plan, but just because of that, the way in which it is so linear, what's sort of use that you see through that type of POS?
So the linear came out of the original commission decision as an interface to Rowley Road. As part of our original estate, we have worked through the main roads and we've come to an agreement where we can have that in land, and that's essentially the bund and the noise walls on top of that, so that acts as that noise attenuation. We're working through the main roads and they've in principle supported the continuation. So the landscape plans that actually accompany the amendment are probably a little bit more conservative, where we're pretty comfortable now and confident that we will be able to the Rowley Road design is much more advanced. Continue the strategy, push more of that batter, sort of straddling our site into the PCO land, which will then continue that strategy for noise attenuation. and it will just get much more usable, for one of the better term, space in that little park.
So talking about passive recreation through there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And going back to our original one, we have nestled sort of an entire playground in there and sort of parks. We look to see to replicate that to the west.
Thank you. Members, are there any further questions? Thank you very much for your deputation.
Very much.
So members, that concludes our verbal deputations for today, and we have received 2 written deputations. The first was on Part 11B development application in West Perth from Michael Mertz, and that was the subject of the thing that we discussed against the recommendation, and a second deputation from Jane O'Malley of the Pill Harvey Catchment Council in relation to the Point Grey local structure plan. Quite an extensive written deputation there. So that concludes our deputations. We can now move to consideration of the item. So we'll go first to item 3.1, which is the Part 11B development application for the proposed demolition of existing development and construction of a 14-storey mixed-use development at 27 to 35 Outram Street and 46 Ord Street in West Perth. And Jackie German is joining us today from the SDAU. Morning, Jackie. Thank you for joining us and thank you for the report. And we have had a deputation today from Element and the consultant team. Is there anything that you wish to add in relation to the deputation or just generally before we go to questions?
And in general, the application, the main issues with the application, as can be seen from the assessment, is to do with height and heritage with the existing dwelling. As in response to the written deputation, the dwelling isn't on any heritage list or heritage surveys. The City of Perth did consider that recently and determined not to include it on the heritage survey. So it would actually have an as of right demolition under the deemed provisions, the local planning schemes. In regards to height, yes, it does exceed the existing controls. However, it is considered to be consistent with the emerging planning framework, which concentrates more on a plot ratio than height controls. The proposed emerging planning framework also does include variation ability within that planning framework.
Thank you, Jackie. We'll open now for questions. Jackie, probably just one from me. We've heard from the applicant, Commissioner Herron raised some very good questions around the vertical landscape and the trellising. It seems that that's been very well considered. We have seen that vertical landscape is quite tricky in Perth and Western Australia, but it seems that that's been given detailed consideration. Are you satisfied that that will be viable?
Yes, in the officer's recommendation, there are conditions under landscaping in public realm. It does require the final landscaping details and species to be submitted for approval together with the management and maintenance plan.
Jackie. Members, questions of Jackie? Questions? Okay, we're happy then to consider the item. If I could then move to a seconder for the item. By Commissioner Herron, seconded by Member Moore. Please go ahead.
Thank you.
If you wish to.
No, just briefly, I do think that it's a well resolved design overall. I think that the assessment and design process has been extensive. As was shared, the primary concern that I probably had was in relation to the landscape response and the consideration of it, but that is now, I think, appeased. I am comfortable in terms of the overtness around the use of the residential component and it being complementary and contemporary in terms of a work environment. So overall, I'm happy to support the proposal.
Thank you. Member Moore, do you wish to make any comments?
I probably don't have much more to add other than it is a comprehensively, it's well designed. I actually think in this particular circumstance, demolition of the existing built form is, I don't have any issues with that. And I think using that space, it allows them to have a well designed maybe our iconic building. We'll see how long that lasts. But yeah, I'm more than happy to support the proposal.
Thank you. Members, any comments? Just very briefly, I would say that when Dan mentioned that this is unique and distinctive, I would agree on that point. I think this will be a really interesting development for West Perth and will really be form part of that interesting built form landscape. I think that when we talk about the future direction for the City of Perth and their local planning scheme, which is incoming, we can see that it does really address that future planning intent. I think the landscape outcome is really positive at the ground floor, and I do like the ambition in the trellised landscaping. I think that if this does work and we see success here, this would be something that we'd love to see translate to other built form in Perth. So we do hope that that is successful and that those endeavours do result in the visualisation that we see in the agenda before us. So I'm happy to support the development. Commissioner Adair?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't get my hand up fast enough. Yeah, I just want to reiterate some of the comments that have been made. I do think that the architecture is very welcome in Perth. It's nice to see something that's a bit different and it will stand out for Perth as a building. As far as the height is concerned, and I know there has been some issues raised around the height, I have no concern. Given the design of the building, I think the height becomes irrelevant. I think if it was a box, it might be a bit more of a concern. But even so, I think it's minimally over what is permitted, and given the design, I don't think anyone will ever notice it in an urban environment like West Perth. So I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Adair. Are there any further comments? Is there any dissent to the recommendation? Thank you, that is approved. Okay, we shall go on to item 3.2, the standard structure plan for Point Grey, application to extend the approval timeframe. We're joined by Aidan O'Brien, Cale Luxon and John Pride on this item. For joining us. Strong deputations on this item today. Very different perspectives. So if you'd like to comment on those, please feel free if there's anything that you wish to add before we then go to questions.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to emphasise that the proposal in front of us today is for a 12-month extension of the structure plan approval, which is purely intended to allow for the assessment of the structure plan amendment, which has already been advertised and submitted to the department for assessment. And we anticipate that that will be submitted to the committee for its consideration at a later date. There are a lot of issues affecting that structure plan amendment. The City and the Shire and the Peel Harvey Catchment Council have raised numerous environmental, financial and policy issues related to that. However, those are really issues for the structure plan amendment process itself and would be the subject of that assessment. That's really what I'd like to emphasise.
Thank you. If you could just talk to the timing. We've heard from the applicant that they are concerned that 12 months is not enough. And I just wanted to understand from your perspective and the exchange of information now between DPLH and the applicant, how impactful you think the timeframe will be from the Shire's perspective, and whether you think 12 months is sufficient.
Thank you, Chair. The 12 months is really intended to allow for the assessment period to conclude and a decision to be made as to whether the amendment should be approved, not approved, or modified and resubmitted. It's not intended to be all of the time that might be needed for the amendment. If it's determined that the structure plan amendment should not be approved, then the structure plan would simply lapse at the end of that period. However, if it's determined that the structure plan should be modified and resubmitted, then we do have the opportunity to grant a further extension of time to the structure plan to allow for that those processes to happen.
I guess my question is, are you confident that the 12 months will be satisfactory, or would we be better off considering something like an 18-month extension to ensure that it doesn't have to come back in the 11th hour for a further extension to allow the conclusion of the assessment?
I would think that the 12-month period would be sufficient to conclude the assessment.
Thank you very much. Members, over to you for any questions.
If I may. And again, appreciating the fact that this is about the extension and not the new structure plan. I'm just wanting to clarify, because the substantive issues will be about the content of the new structure plan, or the modified version thereof. Are there any risks in your view in relation to the retention of the existing structure plan, given that, of course, the marina is an XU? So this is a holding pattern. I'm just wanting to clarify, would there be, what is the likelihood or opportunity that there would be development that would occur in that ensuing period?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Heller. There is always an element of risk. However, in this case, the risk would seem to be fairly low. It would be mitigated by the fact that there is an existing structure plan amendment process in train. That structure plan amendment would be considered a seriously entertained proposal. It has been advertised. It has been submitted to the department for assessment. So in looking at any subdivision or development proposal, we wouldn't necessarily just be looking at the approved structure plan. We'd be looking at the amendment as well. That said, it is also standard practice in these sorts of situations to hold a development proposal in abeyance pending a determination on an amendment.
Thank you. Through the chair, can I also then ask, what would be the risk to the Commission in terms of allowing this to revoke the structure plan? I'm assuming that in the context of existing zoning and processes to date, that there would be significant risk around compensation and otherwise. Would that be a reasonable assumption?
I would make a similar assumption. However, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a valuer. I couldn't speak to the exact risk that might be attached to a decision of that nature.
Thank you. Well, we're applying planning logic, so and which I'm not going to pretend that there's a law, but the through the chair, then in terms of the process from here, that the amendment would then be presented to the Commission, and it would be at that point in time that, I'm just trying to understand, there wouldn't be an overlap as such, because in the consideration of the amendment, this would fall away. Is that correct?
The decision to extend would fall away?
That's right.
No, the time frame, so the extension would make the structure plan valid through to October 2026. That wouldn't change as a result of the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
I think on that point, Aidan, the amendment would come back with a request to extend as it is a refreshed structure plan at that point for the future development.
I would anticipate a subsequent request for a more significant extension.
Commissioner Adair?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, how progressed is the assessment of the amendment? You said it's with the department for assessment. So is there the reason I'm asking is because if it's just started and there is a possibility that there will be additional information required. Now here that, everyone is optimistic or hoping that you can do it in 12 months, but I'm just trying to get my head around how progressed is the assessment within the department?
Through the chair, I would note that the standard period for assessing a structure plan amendment is 120 days. Within that context, a 12-month extension would seem more than adequate. However, I'll ask Cale to provide some comment as the relevant manager on exactly how far advanced the assessment is.
Thank you. And through the chair, the assessment of the structure plan is progressing, and there is further information to be submitted, and that will require some referral and further assessment. But I anticipate at this stage, hopefully late in the first quarter of 26 or early in the second quarter of 26, we would be in a position to potentially present it to SPC.
Okay, thank you.
We have some contingency time built into the 12 months. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lakey.
Not to labour the time, but all the discussion, we've had a lot of conversation around the time frame. I just wonder, from your perspective, the difference between a 12 months or 18 months or 2 years. So let's say 18 months, if that was provided. What's the negative side of it? I'm trying to grapple why tighten it to 12 months when we've heard from the proponent that that this seems to be taking longer than normal because of the situation that we know, because of the additional information. I'm just trying to understand what the negativity of having it extended 18 months or something.
Thank you. Yeah, through the chair. The 12-month time frame is a reflection of our commitment to progress the assessment of it in a timely fashion as best we can, knowing that there is an option to extend that if further information, further modifications are necessary, but trying to stick to, I guess, what we seem to be as a reasonable time frame for assessment.
But through the chair, but if there is an extension in 10 months, they've got to go through the whole process, reports written, a lot of effort taken by all parties to actually come back and ask this again in 10 months' time. I'm just understanding if we're confident that 18 months would be enough, you know, give that little freedom. It saves a lot of time of the system.
Through the chair, while we're not objectionable to the 18-month at officer level, we thought that given the background of this particular application and the views of Shire as well as the proponent, that 12 months represented a commitment from us to progress the matter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, members? Okay, we'll move to consideration of the item. If I could please have a mover and seconder. Thank you, Commissioner Heron. Seconded by.
I'll second it.
I've got Member Harmon just put his hand up, but thank you very much, Commissioner Adair. Appreciated. Okay, would you like to make any comment, Commissioner Heron?
Yes, and I suppose I would start off by talking specifically to the issue of time frame, and whether it's 12, 18, and I would welcome the views of others. Personally, I hold the view that the 12 months, if this hasn't, given the context that's been provided, if it hasn't progressed in that time frame, I think it would probably be worthwhile for us for it to come back, because I'd want to understand what those issues are, so that because I think that would be reflective of issues that we should probably come to terms with. I understand much of the submission from the Shire's perspective is around the new framework, which I think we need to prepare ourselves will be an interesting process and one that will require careful consideration. I am, however, comfortable that it is appropriate, given the base zoning and the processes that have been conducted to date, that this holdover pattern should be retained as a fallback proposition until such time as this amendment can be presented to us. I feel comfortable and confident that the 12 months will be sufficient. And as I sort of say, from my perspective at least, I'm thinking that would probably be good to come back if it hasn't progressed, but again, happy to take the views of others.
Thank you. Commissioner, Member Harmon.
Noting Commissioner Heron's point, I was seconding the substantive motion, but I'd probably put forward an amendment in terms of time frame to push it out to 18 months. I think the planning risk is relatively low, and I'll take the officers on face value that they will have it dealt with in a much shorter time frame. But I think the balance of risk, I think it just gives them a little bit of extra time to deal with issues that are probably not yet known in great detail.
Thank you, Member Harmon. Any further comments? Commissioner Adair?
Thanks, Chair. I concur with Member Harmon. I would actually go so far as to give it a 2-year period of extension. The reason being that, and I have full faith that the officers have every intention of moving this along. It is the unknown, and the fact that this has to be referred to other agencies, etc. Other issues do inevitably come up, and whilst I respect what Commissioner Heron was saying about we should probably be kept informed about what those are, we all know, I think, that with this kind of structure plan and the opposition to it from different angles, as opposed to the support from the opposing angles, there is often additional and more additional information required, which unfortunately costs a lot of money and a lot of time. So I think rather than it coming back to us in 12 months' time and us being asked to consider another 12-month extension, I'd rather deal with it now and come back as a fully considered amendment that we can consider it on whole.
Thanks, Commissioner Adair. Can I just say, look, I'd like to commend the officers for wanting to stick to this time frame. I mean, this is what we're really asking you to do as a commission in terms of accelerated planning. So look, I was prepared to stick with the recommendation, but if the consideration of my colleagues is that 18 months, I would prefer 18 months to 2 years gives that breathing space. I think we've had word from our officers that they are not opposed to that, and it's not something that I think is a significant matter to agree upon. But I just wanted to say to the officers, I really appreciate that you have set yourself this deadline and are determined to meet it. Commissioner Lakey.
Yeah, I think just to endorse that, I mean, it's unusual for us wanting extensions. So I think it's more about the unknowns, like Commissioner Adair and Member Harmon said, it's the unknowns that could come in. And I can see if it did come back to us, it would require a significant report, but probably half resolved information again at that point. I'd rather it come back to the Commission fully resolved, so we can make a very objective assessment of it. And therefore I would be supportive of an extension. I would be supportive of 2 years, but I'd also 18 months, and that was the general view. Then I would support.
I feel there's an amendment coming on. I just need someone to move it.
Chair, I'm happy to, go on.
Oh,
Paul can do it.
Go ahead. What are you moving?
So I think, look, on balance, having listened to everyone, and I know the original application was for 3 years, I would be comfortable with 18 months is where I've landed at. I think that extra 6 months will enable that fullness of time. So
I'll just see if you have a seconder for that. Is that 18 months seconded by Commissioner Adair? Yes.
Okay.
Let's continue.
Oh, that's it.
That was it.
That was it. That was my
Okay. Commissioner Adair, do you wish to add?
I think I've said in my view. So yeah, I support the 18 months.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to add anything further?
Yes, on review, I take on board the imperative to try and get this progressed, but I do believe we need to be a bit pragmatic in timeframes to be considered. But I would think it would be of benefit to monitor this particular proposal, and if there was a way that the Commission could be updated in the interim, that may be good and to assist progressing this. So I'm supporting of the amendment.
Thank you, Member Franklin. We can note that there's been a request for an update, and probably at a point at which if you hit a milestone would be good to understand when it would be appropriate to come back and brief us. Is there any further comments on the amendment? Is there any dissent? The amendment is carried. Is there any further discussion on the substantive motion? Is there any dissent? Thank you, that's carried. Thank you very much.
None of these tables is designed to take out your knees.
Depends where you're sitting.
Constantly.
No, if you're back.
A lot of problems with this room.
First world problems, of course.
Okay, everyone, we're now moving on to item 3.3, the standard structure plan for Hammond Quarter, amendment number 1. And we're joined by Aidan O'Brien, Lydia Palermo and Lisa Hall. Thank you and welcome to the meeting. We have a deputation today which is really strongly focused on the Christmas tree farm and the categorisation of that as forest category A, and discussion in the report going to the matter of whether that could be class B woodland. That would be it would be appreciated to delve into that a little bit more.
Thank you, Chair. The advice that the team has received from the Department of Fire and Emergency Services, the City of Coburn, and internal technical advice has all indicated that the vegetation should be classified as proposed in the schedule of modifications. Didn't really have a strong basis for departing from those recommendations. We needed to rely on the technical advice that we had received at that point in time. Note that the city is considering an application for retrospective approval of the Christmas tree farm. However, we don't know at this stage what the likely determination is going to be and what conditions attached to that might be. So we've really been in a position of having to follow the technical advice that's been provided through to us.
Just in relation to that retrospective DA, do you know the details in terms of that in the statutory timeframe and who it's going to be determined by?
No, we don't have that level of information from the City of Coburn.
Okay, thank you. Members, I'll open up to questions. Thank you, Commissioner Heron.
Subject to the development approval being issued and there being a fire management control attached to it, what would the current parameters remain binding, or are they subject to change should there be additional conditions applied to the adjoining property?
Thank you, Commissioner Heron. Each subdivision application would need to demonstrate compliance with State Planning Policy 3.7 for bushfire risk mitigation. Now, depending on the time that elapses between the structure plan and the subdivision process, it would be open to the applicant to submit a revised bushfire management plan at the time of subdivision, which takes into account any more recent decisions or changes that have occurred on the ground on that neighbouring property. If that were to occur and a revised bushfire management plan shows a lesser bell contour affecting the lots, then that would be taken into account through the subdivision and development processes.
So at that point, they could argue if the retrospective DA does have its own BMP or some kind of remediation or exit strategy associated, that they could then argue to bring back the 15 dwellings that they are seeking to have.
Well, they're not losing 15 dwellings. What we've done is look at the worst case scenario mapping for the vegetation of those lots and look to ensure that even if it's classified at that worst case scenario, those lots would still be capable of development.
Okay.
They are. It's just a question of the standard to which those dwellings would need to be constructed.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any other questions? Thank you very much, Member Harmon.
So just on that point, and just so I'm clear, the implication of the increased BAL rating is that the result in terms of the structure plan, the subdivision currently is the increase of the width of the westernmost road. Is that correct? Plus the additional design requirements of the dwelling?
In part, the increase in the width of the road reserve is a response to the bushfire issue. However, it's also a response to the need to ensure that retaining walls battering for that local road on the western boundary is contained within the site and doesn't encroach on the neighbouring property.
Mr. Lakey.
Thank you, through the chair. I understand where you're coming from. I'm grappling with the idea that if you look at the moment and that the additional cost in what is a very affordable market, I could see that additional cost for the BAL will probably prevent construction happening on those lots in a time when we do need a lot of housing supply. So I'm challenged by that. The proponent, and I think I wrote this right, said a compromise would be a BAL of 19, I think, and to understand that, because the sector understands that. Was I correct in?
That was the Class B woodland.
Class B woodland. What's your thoughts on that?
Look, I really need to be guided by the technical advice from the city and DFES, who have more experience and qualifications and expertise, etc., in this area. The advice that they've provided is that it should be classified as we've set out in the report and the schedule of modifications.
Thank you.
Aidan, did you say that was the advice of this DFES and also internal technical advice? So you've sort of covered it off from those three angles.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Brooks.
Yeah, just I think my comment would be it is quite normal, as far as I'm aware, as part of the process for BAL ratings to get amended through subdivision process, through then development application processes. So is that correct? I mean, that's my understanding. It's quite a normal process that they might start as one thing and then 12 months later it gets reassessed as part of the subdivision application, and it can be quite different based on what's going on the site and the surrounds.
That is correct. We see it quite regularly in greenfields areas where one landowner goes and subdivides ahead of the neighbouring landowner.
I think, Aidan, you said that at subdivision stage, if the retrospective DA has been approved and has been mitigated, the site's been mitigated, then that would affect at subdivision stage, that could be taken into consideration.
And also, sorry, am I right that it's that the bushfire classification assessment is only valid for 12 months anyway, from the point when the site assessment was carried out?
I believe so.
Yeah, so it has to be redone in 12 months anyway.
Member Franklin?
Yes, through the chair. Also in consideration of this, if this matter is addressed through the development application process, hopefully that it could be, could that then not be dealt with as an amendment to the structure plan if there needed to be certainty in respect to the road design? I'm just wondering if the staging of this development could actually facilitate a review of the road design as well at a later point if that issue fell away.
The structure plan could be amended at a later date in relation to the road design. However, I would note that the neighbouring property remains rural zoned and there's no structure planning and development of that. So really what we're looking to do is make sure that the road reserve is wide enough to contain all the battering, the painting.
So it's not just initiated for the fire management, really. It's so that stays as is anyway. Okay, so it would only be in regard to the fire management assessments, which are ongoing anyway. So don't materially affect the structure plan as such. Clarification.
It's interesting that we're focusing on this issue because when you start reading the report, you think that the air quality buffer is actually going to be the key issue. I mean, bushfire, of course, is extremely important. I'm not doing that at all. But did you want to make any comments about the original air quality buffer versus that which is in the SPP and how we've landed here? That was a big sigh.
Thank you, Chair. It's an issue with a long history to it. The commission determined in 2010, I think it was, that there should be a non-residential transition area from the buffer proper through to adjacent residential areas, particularly as it relates to Alcoa's residue storage in the area. However, since then, there's been additional technical information and strategic advice produced by the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation through the EPA under Section 16, I think it is, of the Environmental Protection Act. There have also been a number of land use planning decisions. The Minister has approved a number of subdivision applications in the area. There have also been decisions, for example, to adopt the original structure plan for this estate and to amend the structure plan to the area north of Wattleup Road. Those decisions were both made by the Statutory Planning Committee. This recommendation really follows the same process and adopts the same logic as taken with those previous structure planning and subdivision determinations.
Excellent, thank you. Good history. And it is outlined in the report, but I thought for the record, I think it was interesting just to have that at least aired in the meeting. Are there any further questions? Let's move to consideration of the report. If I could then have a mover and seconder. Moved by Commissioner Herron, seconded by Member Franklin. Would you like to make any comment?
Well, I think I'll just limit the comments, I suppose, to the issue that has been raised around the BAL. And although I take the point around the issues and challenges of the BAL assessment, I don't believe it would be appropriate for us to make a determination outside of the advice that has been provided. And although I can accept that the risk, it may be abstract and I can imagine the area of logic that's being applied. However, I think if we understand also the consequences should that actually occur, it would be, the onus would be on us in terms of how we have made that decision against that. And I do think that there is a development application process that the subdivision process would allow for that to be reviewed. Therefore, I'm happy to support the recommendation as is provided. I do think that there is obviously a range of other issues that are presented, and I think that they have been appropriately reconciled, and particularly the item around the road reserve, the understanding that that was linked not only to the BAL assessment, but also to the containment on the property, to me, gives suitable resolution to the proposal as it stands.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Herron. Member Franklin, would you like to add anything?
No, I probably concur with I definitely concur with the Commissioner Herron's comments, and I'm confident that the planning framework can deal with the matters at hand in regards to the adjoining Christmas tree farm.
Any further comments? Any dissent to the, sorry, Commissioner Adair, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll keep it short, Chair. I just wanted to address the Christmas tree farm as well and the BAL. And I think that what the applicant put forward would be a very practical outcome of putting a sunset clause on that land use, that should it cease, all trees be removed. But unfortunately, that's outside our power. So I'm very happy to support the recommendation as it currently stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Adair. Any dissent to the recommendation? Thank you, that's carried. So that concludes our non-confidential items for today. We do have a confidential item remaining. If I could please ask for a moving so that we move to consideration of that behind closed doors. Thank you very much. Commissioner Lakey's moved. Member Harman has seconded. Any dissent? Thank you very much.